The rumble of our Harleys was our heartbeat until a lost child's cry in the deep woods changed everything. We were warned to ride away, but some rules are worth dying for. The rumble is a language all its own. It's not just noise, it's a deep, guttural vibration that starts in the engine, travels up through the steel frame, and settles right into your bones. For the Ironhounds, that rumble is our heartbeat. It's the sound of freedom, of brotherhood, of leaving the world and its nonsense in a cloud of dust. There were 10 of us that day, carving our way through the winding backroads of upstate New York. The sun was starting to bleed across the horizon, painting the autumn leaves in shades of fire and gold. I was riding near the front, just behind Preacher, our club president. At 23, I was one of the younger guys, but I'd earned my patch, and riding with these men felt more like home than any building I'd ever lived in. Preacher raised a leather-gloved hand, and the whole line of roaring Harleys slowed to a synchronized purr. He'd pulled over on a gravel shoulder overlooking a valley that was sinking into shadow. We all killed our engines, and the sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the cooling ticks of our pipes. Grizz, a man built like a refrigerator with a beard to match, grunted as he swung his leg over his bike. "What's the hold-up, Prez? My throat's drier than a popcorn fart." Preacher didn't answer right away. He was a man of about 50, with more miles on his face than most of us had on our bikes. He just stood there, head cocked, listening to something beyond the crickets. "You guys hear that?" he asked, his voice low and calm. We all went still. I strained my ears, hearing only the whisper of the wind through the pines that lined the road. Then I caught it, faint, high-pitched and rhythmic. It was a sound so out of place in that wilderness that it made the hair on my arms stand up. It was the sound of a child crying. Not a tantrum cry, not an angry cry, but the desperate, hopeless sobbing of someone truly lost. We looked at each other, a silent question passing between a dozen hardened men. Kids and bikes don't usually mix, especially not out here, miles from the nearest town. Preacher nodded towards the sound, which seemed to be coming from a small, dirt track that veered off the main road and disappeared into the darkening woods. 2 of you, with me. Jake, Grizz. The rest of you, stay here. Keep the radios on. My heart hammered against my ribs as Grizz and I followed Preacher down the path. The gravel crunched under our heavy boots, and the crying grew louder, more distinct with every step. After about 50 yards, the track opened into a small, forgotten clearing. And there she was, a little girl, no older than 5 or 6, sitting on a mossy log. She had pigtails the color of straw, a dirty pink dress that was torn at the hem, and she was clutching a one-eyed teddy bear like it was the only thing holding her together. Her small shoulders shook with each sob, and her face was streaked with dirt and tears. She hadn't noticed us yet. Grizz, who could stare down a charging bull, actually took a half-step back. He had a daughter of his own. "Preacher," he whispered, his voice thick. "What the hell?" Preacher moved slowly, deliberately, raising his hands to show they were empty. "Hey there, little one," he said, his voice soft, a tone I'd rarely heard him use. "You all right? You lost?" The girl's head snapped up, her eyes wide and blue and terrified, fixed on us. 3 large men in dusty leather, covered in patches and road grime. Her crying hitched and she scrambled back off the log, pressing herself against a large oak tree as if she could melt right into it. The bear was her only shield. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're not going to hurt you," I said, trying to keep my own voice steady. I took a cautious step forward. "We just want to help." "Where are your mommy and daddy?" She just shook her head, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. She wouldn't speak. She just watched us, trembling like a trapped rabbit. We were getting nowhere. Preacher was about to try again when we heard another engine. It wasn't a bike. It was the strained groan of an old truck. Headlights cut through the twilight, and a beat-up Ford pickup rattled to a stop on the main road behind our bikes. A man in a county sheriff's uniform got out. He was older, with a paunch and a tired, weathered face that said he'd seen it all. He walked toward our guys, his hand resting casually on his sidearm, and after a brief exchange, one of them pointed down the dirt track to us. The sheriff ambled our way. his expression unreadable. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, his eyes taking in the scene. 3 bikers. 1 terrified little girl. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look alarmed. He looked resigned. "Evening, boys," he said, his voice a low drawl. He barely glanced at us, his gaze fixed on the child. Looks like you found her." Preacher straightened up. "Sheriff, we were just passing through, heard her crying. Any idea who she is? Parents file a report?" The sheriff let out a long, slow sigh, the kind of sound a man makes when he's faced with a problem he knows has no good solution. He looked from the little girl still plastered to the tree to the 3 of us. His eyes were heavy, tired but sharp. "Listen to me," he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious and cold. "I'm only going to say this once. You get back on your bikes, you ride past this clearing and you don't look back. You pretend she's a rock. You pretend she isn't even there. It's what everyone in this county knows to do." I stared at him, dumbfounded. Grizz let out a low growl. "What in the hell are you talking about? We're not leaving a kid out here alone." The sheriff's face hardened, the tired lines around his eyes deepening into crevices. He took a deliberate step closer, making sure we understood the weight of his next words. "You'll leave her," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "because the people who put her there are watching, and I guarantee you they are a hell of a lot worse than any ghost you could imagine." A cold silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. The sheriff's words didn't just land. They seeped into the ground, poisoning the whole clearing. Grizz took a step forward, his knuckles white as he clenched his fists. "What people? You're the law. You can't just let them leave a baby out here as bait." "Bait is exactly what she is," the sheriff shot back, his eyes darting nervously toward the trees that ringed our little clearing. He looked like a man standing on a landmine. "And it ain't my jurisdiction. Not really. There's the law in the books, and then there's the law of these hills. They don't mix. I have a family. I like waking up in the morning." He looked at each of us, his gaze lingering on the iron hounds patch on my cut. "You boys look like you understand that kind of thing. You have your own laws, your own territory. Well, this is theirs, and you just trespassed." Preacher was unnervingly calm. He hadn't moved a muscle, just stood there, absorbing it all. "So what's the story, Sheriff? Who are they?" The sheriff laughed, a short, bitter bark that held no humor. "You don't want to know. Trust me. You see, people go missing out here sometimes. Hikers, hunters, tourists who take a wrong turn. The official report says they got lost or it was a bear. But the locals, we know. They're taken. And this," he gestured to the little girl, who was now watching him with the same wide-eyed terror she'd shown us. "This is how they choose. It's some kind of offering. A test. They leave her here, and they watch. Anyone who interferes, anyone who tries to be a hero, they become the new target. The girl gets to go home, and they take you instead." My blood ran cold. This wasn't some backwoods feud. It was something ritualistic, insane. I looked at the little girl, and the torn dress and dirty face took on a whole new, horrifying meaning. She wasn't lost. She'd been placed here, dressed up and delivered. "And you just let it happen?" Grizz's voice was a low growl of disbelief. "What do you want me to do?" the sheriff snapped, his composure finally cracking. "Huh? Call in the state boys? They came once. 2 troopers went into these woods looking for a missing person. They never came out. Their car was found a week later, parked right where we're standing. Empty. Engine cold. The woods just swallowed them. After that, the state declared this area unstable terrain and let the county handle it, and we handle it by staying the hell away." He took a deep breath, reining himself in. "I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you this because I can see you're not bad men. You're just in a place you don't belong. So I'm asking you man to man, get on your damn bikes and ride away." For a long moment nobody spoke. The crickets seemed to have gone silent, as if they were listening too. The fate of this little girl, and maybe our own, hung suspended in the twilight. Preacher finally broke the silence. He turned his head slowly, and his eyes met mine, then Grizz's. He didn't need to say a word. We weren't leaving her. It wasn't in our DNA. The iron hounds patch on our backs meant something. We protect our own, And for tonight, this little girl was our own. Preacher turned back to the sheriff. We're not leaving her. It wasn't a debate. It was a statement of fact. The sheriff's shoulders slumped in defeat. He looked ancient. I figured you'd say that. God help you. He started to turn away. Don't say I didn't warn you. Hold on, Preacher said, his voice stopping the sheriff in his tracks. You're just going to walk away? I'm going back to my truck to call in a busted taillight on the edge of my patrol zone. It's going to take me a good hour to write the report. A real long hour. He gave us a hard look. Whatever you're going to do it fast. And don't come back through my county. Ever. He started walking, a man retreating from a battle he'd lost years ago. The moment he was gone, Preacher was in motion. Jake, you're the best with kids. Try and get her to come to you. Grizz, get on the horn to the others. Tell them the plan is changing. We're not stopping for the night. We're punching it straight through to the state line. Full escort. I nodded, my throat tight. I knelt down, trying to make myself seem smaller, less threatening. Hey, I said softly, my voice barely a whisper. It's okay now. The policeman is gone. We're going to take you somewhere safe. We're going to find your mommy. The little girl stared at me, her chest still hitching with silent sobs. She took a tiny, hesitant step away from the tree. I saw something in her hand then, clutched tight alongside the teddy bear. It was a small, crudely carved wooden bird. That's a pretty bird, I said, trying to find any connection I could. Who gave you that? She looked down at the carving, her little fingers tracing its wings. Her voice, when it came, was a tiny, fragile thing, like the sound of dry leaves skittering across pavement. He did, she whispered, her eyes lifting from the bird to stare past me, into the deep, dark woods behind. He said the tall man would watch over me until Mommy came back. As the last word left her lips, a sound split the air. A loud, sharp crack from the woods. Not a falling branch. It was the sound of a heavy foot stepping on dry wood. It was close, too close. Every one of us froze, our heads snapping towards the sound. The woods that had been a silent backdrop moments before were now a living, breathing threat. And we knew, with a certainty that chilled us to the bone, that we were no longer just being watched. We had been heard. The snap of the branch hung in the air like a gunshot. Instinct took over. Grizz, who had been speaking lowly into his radio, dropped it. It swung from its cord, forgotten. Preacher moved with a speed that defied his age, placing himself squarely between the little girl and the wall of trees. My own hand went instinctively to the heavy maglite on my belt, my thumb finding the switch. It wasn't a weapon, not really. But in the encroaching darkness, it was better than nothing. The woods were no longer just woods. Every shadow seemed to stretch, to deepen. Every rustle of leaves was a footstep. "Get the girl," Preacher commanded, his voice a low growl that cut through the tension. "Now." I didn't hesitate. I moved forward, keeping low to the ground, my eyes scanning the impenetrable darkness ahead. "Come on, sweetheart," I whispered, holding out my hand. "It's time to go. We're going to get on my big, loud motorcycle. It's fun, I promise." Her terror seemed to have frozen her to the spot. Her wide blue eyes were still locked on the point in the forest where the sound had come from. She started shaking her head, a silent, frantic motion. "He's here," she breathed. Her voice so faint I barely heard it. "The tall man. He doesn't like noise." Another sound came then, from a different direction. A low whistle. It was a strange, melodic two-note call, like a bird I'd never heard before. A moment later, it was answered by an identical whistle from the other side of the clearing. They were talking to each other. They were coordinating, and we were standing right in the middle of their trap. "Forget the bikes," Preacher hissed, his head on a swivel. "They're too far. We'll never make it." He was right. We were a good 50 yards from the road, a lifetime away when you're being hunted. "Grizz, back to back with me. Jake, you grab her. Don't let her go, no matter what." I scooped her up in one motion. She was feather-light, all bony limbs and trembling fear. She didn't fight me. She just buried her face in the leather of my cut, her little hands clutching my collar so tight her knuckles were white. Her one-eyed bear was squished between us, I could feel her heart hammering like a trapped bird's against my own chest. Grizz and Preacher were now a solid unit of leather and muscle, turning slowly, scanning the perimeter. The woods were alive with subtle sounds now, a soft scuffing in the leaf litter, a whisper of cloth against bark. They were closing in. The sun had completely vanished, and the clearing was bathed in an eerie, pre-dark gloom that made everything seem unreal. "What's the plan, Prez?" Grizz muttered, his voice tight. "Plan is to not die," Preacher grunted back. "Keep your eyes open. They're trying to flank us." That's when I saw it. For a split second, a flicker of movement in the deepest shadows between two ancient pines. It wasn't an animal. It was tall and unnaturally thin, a silhouette that seemed to stretch and distort the darkness around it. It moved with a fluid, silent grace that was utterly terrifying. Then it was gone. But I knew what I'd seen. The tall man. The little girl in my arms must have sensed it too, because she let out a tiny whimper. "He's coming," she whispered into my jacket. Suddenly the whistling stopped. The woods fell completely, unnervingly silent. The kind of silence that precedes a storm, when the world holds its breath. It was 100 times worse than the noise. We stood frozen for what felt like an eternity. 3 bikers and a little girl. A tiny island in an ocean of hostile silence. My muscles screamed with tension. "Where'd they go?" Grizz whispered, his voice cracking. "They didn't go anywhere," Preacher said, his eyes narrowed to slits. "They're waiting." Waiting for what? The question hung in the air. We got our answer a moment later. A single heavy object landed in the center of the clearing with a soft thud. It rolled a few feet and came to a stop in a patch of pale moss not 10 feet from us. My blood turned to ice water. It was a helmet. A motorcycle helmet. It was painted flat black, just like ours, but this one was horribly familiar. It had a custom airbrushed silver wolf howling at a moon on the side. It was Bulldog's helmet. Bulldog was one of the guys Preacher had told to wait with the bikes. A wave of nausea washed over me. They hadn't just been watching the girl. They had been watching us. They'd circled around, gotten behind us, gotten to our brothers. The helmet was a message. A trophy. A promise of what was to come. Grizz let out a choked sound, a mix of rage and horror. "No." Before any of us could process the full implications, a voice echoed from the trees. It was a strange voice, high and raspy, like the sound of a snake hissing over dry leaves. It wasn't male or female, just wrong. "You broke the rules," the voice hissed, seeming to come from every direction at once. The girl was the offering. Now, you are the sacrifice. And then the woods erupted. Not with a roar, but with movement. From the shadows, figures began to emerge. They weren't just tall. They were impossibly elongated, their limbs too long, their bodies rail-thin, all wrapped in dark, ragged cloth that helped them blend into the trees. They didn't carry guns or knives that I could see. They didn't need to. Their very presence was a weapon. They moved with a predatory silence, their faces obscured by the deep hoods of their cloaks, forming a loose, tightening circle around us. There were at least a dozen of them, maybe more. The sheriff hadn't been lying. We had stumbled into a nightmare that had been living in these hills for God knows how long. We were hopelessly outnumbered, cut off, and holding a little girl who was meant to be their prize. Preacher slowly drew the large hunting knife he always kept sheathed at his belt. The blade caught the last of the fading light. "Hounds," he said, his voice deadly calm. "No surrender." I held the girl tighter, turning to shield her with my body. I could hear Grizz drawing his own blade. This was it. A clearing in the middle of nowhere was where we were going to make our last stand. But as the circle of silent, unnerving figures closed in, their long, shadowy forms converging on us, the little girl in my arms suddenly twisted, craning her neck to look up at me. Her face in the dim light was no longer terrified. The tears were gone. Her blue eyes were wide and clear, and fixed on me with an expression of chilling, absolute calm. "You should have left me," she whispered, her voice no longer that of a frightened child, but something older, colder. "He doesn't like it when you touch his things." Her words hit me harder than a fist. His things. For a horrifying second, my grip on her faltered. This wasn't a rescue. This was a transaction we had interrupted, and we were about to pay the price. The circle of tall, silent figures stopped, their cowled heads tilting in unison, as if listening to a command I couldn't hear. The high, hissing voice echoed again, closer this time. The child speaks the truth. She belongs to the grove. Preacher didn't flinch. No child belongs in a place like this, he snarled, brandishing his knife. Tonight she belongs with us. That was the signal. The figures surged forward. They didn't run. They glided over the ground with an unnatural speed, their long arms reaching. Grizz let out a roar and met the first one head on, his big frame a bulwark of flesh and leather. His knife flashed, but it was like trying to stab smoke. The creature simply flowed around him, its long, spindly fingers reaching for his throat. I spun around, putting my back to Preacher, holding the girl tight against my chest. One of them was on me in a heartbeat. A hand, cold as the grave and shockingly strong, wrapped around my arm, its grip like steel bands. I kicked out, my heavy boot connecting with something that felt disturbingly brittle, and the creature recoiled with a dry, rustling sound. We were being overwhelmed. For everyone we pushed back, two more took its place. They weren't trying to kill us quickly. It was a slow, suffocating press, a deliberate and terrifying dismantling of our defenses. I could hear Grizz grunting with effort, the sickening sound of a fist hitting something that didn't yield. Preacher was a whirlwind of controlled fury, his knife a blur, but even he couldn't hold them all back. Then, a new sound cut through the chaos, a deep, guttural roar that vibrated through the very soles of my boots. It wasn't one of them. It was the thunder of a dozen Harley-Davidson engines firing to life at once. The rest of the Iron Hounds. They hadn't just waited. They'd heard Grizz on the radio, and they'd come. Headlights sliced through the darkness, turning the clearing into a chaotic stage of stark light and deep, dancing shadows. The tall figures recoiled from the sudden glare, hissing, shielding their unseen faces. Our brothers were rolling in, not on the road, but crashing right through the underbrush, their bikes bucking like angry bulls. They formed a ring of steel and chrome around us, their engines revving in a defiant war cry. The tall figures hesitated, their silent, coordinated attack broken. This wasn't in their script. They were hunters of the quiet and the dark, predators who relied on fear and isolation. They weren't prepared for a full-scale war with a motorcycle club. "Get to the bikes!" Preacher yelled, seeing the opening. He shoved one of the creatures back, giving us a precious few feet of breathing room. I ran, shielding the girl as best I could. One of the hounds, a guy named Tiny, reached down from his bike, his hand outstretched. "Give her to me, Jake!" he shouted over the din. I lifted her up, and he swung her onto the seat in front of him, wrapping one massive arm around her. Grizz and Preacher fought their way back to back, moving towards the circle of bikes. The tall figures seemed to melt back toward the tree line, their forms becoming indistinct, swallowed by the shadows they commanded. They weren't retreating in a rout. It was a tactical withdrawal, as if they knew this battle was lost, but the war was far from over. As I swung my leg over my own bike, the high, hissing voice slithered through the air one last time, a final, chilling promise. The debt will be paid. We will take what we are owed. We didn't wait to hear more. Preacher gave the signal, and we opened our throttles. The sound was apocalyptic. We blasted out of that clearing, leaving the helmet, the woods, and the nightmare behind us. We didn't slow down. We rode hard and fast, a tight formation of roaring engines pushing the miles between us and that cursed place. Tiny kept the girl wrapped in his jacket, and after a few miles of pure adrenaline-fueled speed, I saw her small head droop. She had finally fallen asleep, exhausted by her own terror. We rode through the entire night, stopping only for gas. No one spoke of what happened. We didn't have to. We'd all seen it. We'd all felt it. Bulldog's empty seat in our formation was a silent, screaming testament to the reality of the threat. Just after dawn, we crossed the state line and pulled into the parking lot of a small 24-hour diner. The sheriff from the next county over was there, getting coffee. Preacher walked straight up to him, the sleeping girl now cradled in his own arms. We found this child on the highway. Preacher said, his voice level, betraying none of the night's horror. Looks lost. No parents in sight. The sheriff, a young, clear-eyed man, took the girl gently. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Seeing the uniform, the bright lights of the diner, she started to cry, but this time it was a normal cry. The cry of a scared little girl who just wanted her mom. The spell, whatever it was broken. She pointed a shaky finger back the way we came. "Bad men in the trees," she whimpered. The authorities took it from there. Her name was Lily, and she'd been missing for 2 days from a campground 30 miles away from where we found her. Her parents were beyond relieved, and the official story became a simple abduction by a person or persons unknown. We gave our statements, leaving out the parts that no one would ever believe. We were just a group of bikers who got lucky. We didn't mention the tall man, the hissing voice, or the sheriff who told us to look away. And we never, ever mentioned Bulldog. To the world, he just rode off one day and never came back. But we knew. He paid the debt for us. We buried an empty coffin a week later. We stood in our leather cuts, a silent ring around a hole in the ground, and we understood. The world is full of monsters, but they don't always have fangs and claws. Sometimes they're just an empty space in the riding line, a ghost of rumbling thunder on a lonely road. We still ride those back roads, but we're different now. We ride a little faster, our eyes scan the trees a little more often, and we listen. We listen for the things that hide in the silence, and we know, better than anyone, what bikers are told when they see a crying child. They're told to keep riding. But we, the Iron Hounds, we learned that some rules are meant to be broken, no matter the cost.